With the Bills at the bye, we're examining the health of the team with Dr. Kyle Trimble. And of course, I'm going to offer you my NFL draft prospects to watch today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Saturday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Well, folks, the Bills are at the bye like we've been talking about all week, and there's a lot to talk about. So here we are on a Saturday, and we're going to talk about the health of the team, right? This is an important opportunity for the team to be off, to get healthy. So we're going to examine that, and then, of course, give you my NFL draft prospects to watch here in just a little bit. But first, Dr. Kyle Trimble is here, and not only is he Dr. Kyle Trimble, this man is a chicken farmer. We're getting ready to record this podcast, and he's telling me what he was doing beforehand, and he's telling me he's cooping up the chickens. My guy is not only a doctor of physical therapy, but renowned chicken farmer, just like Von Miller. Kyle, what's up, man?
I'm doing very good. I wish I could be as good as Von Miller with the chicken farming, but I'll take any tips he has.
Yeah, well, I was hearing about your operation. I'll tell you, it's impressive. I didn't know you could keep chickens in Western New York through the winter, but look, you've got it all figured out. I'm sure they're nice and warm and producing the eggs that you're looking for. Let's true. You know, neither you look, I know you got the chickens, but nobody came here to listen to either you or I talk about chickens. But we do want to talk about the injuries for the Buffalo Bills. And Kyle, I got to start with Jordan Poyer. And this is a interesting and confusing situation for me. I'm thinking this is a rib injury. Then he doesn't fly with the team because he's not medically cleared to fly. And I don't feel like an expert about injuries at all, but I didn't realize that a rib injury could prevent you from flying. Could be a lung. What's going on here?
So this is definitely interesting. So just to recap, what happened was Jordan Poyer gets that game-changing interception against the Ravens in Week 4, falls down the end zone. I saw him talk with the medical staff down on the sideline on one knee. And then they report he goes for x-rays after the game. And everyone's like, well, he's fine. He's fine. He's moving around. He's doing great and whatnot. And then they said he has rib injury, which, okay, he goes for x-rays. You're going to see he has a rib injury. That's fine. That happens often. And then we're getting reports from John Scott, who broke the news of Spectrum News, that he had a lung contusion, pneumothorax, as they were calling it. And that's why he could not fly with the team. He had to do the 15-hour car ride from Western New York out to our Arrowhead Stadium out in Missouri there. So you're just trying to wrap your head around. It's like, wait, what did we miss? And so you start getting some more information, try to identify what's going on here. And so going back again, he goes up, he gets his interception, he falls right on his back there. At that point, then he cracks 2 ribs. He clarified that in his new podcast that dropped just the other day. The Buffalo News detailed this out, kind of highlighted the pieces from the injury there. And then he said that caused a lung contusion. And so you can have there's different variations there. So you can have a punctured lung, you can have a collapsed lung, you can have a lung contusion. All those can affect how the breathing is with regards to the quality of lung tissue there. So he likely didn't have a rib fracture that punctured the lung, but just sometimes direct blow can disrupt the alveolar tissue within the lungs that can cause that lung contusion. And what happens with that is the lungs sit inside the pleural cavity. And then there's let me make sure I read this correctly, because this is more emergency medicine, which I'm familiar with, but I'm not dealing with on a regular basis as much. I'm dealing with the after effects being a physical therapist. So the lungs reside within the pleural cavity. In between the parietal and visceral pleurae, the interpleural space is filled with fluid. This allows the surface tension to open the lungs up and or in and out with regards to the negative pressure required to get the lungs inflated, and then the air is pushed out through positive pressure there. when there is a lung contusion, a pneumothorax, where that space that's fluid filled and even where the lungs reside in gets punctured, a lot of positive air comes in. That lung is no longer able to expand against the negative pressure. That positive air pushes in, kind of collapses the lung. So Jordan Poyer said he described that feeling as though when you drink too much water and water slosh around, when he's doing the interviews, that's the way he said he felt like, which I thought was interesting because we know there wasn't water in there, but he just could feel like things were kind of off there. And then he had to go consult a heart doctor, a lung doctor, and just had to find out what was going on. They said that that's why, he was limited in playing against the Steelers, even though there's a report that he could have played. A lot of people were really wondering why you could be cleared to play in an NFL football game but not fly.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is that the air pressure in a cabin, if everybody's ever flown, you could feel the air pressurization. And then when you get higher up in the air, the air pressure, as you go up higher in the atmosphere, does decrease. There is some effect on the oxygen as well. The damaged lung tissue doesn't process oxygen as efficiently, but more or less is related to the cabin pressure. So here's how I look at it. There might be other variables that I not going to get into, but they can control for the variable if he has a collapsed lung on the sidelines. They can reinflate that thing by aspirating the chest wall and getting the negative pressure back in there. But if they're up in the air and that's already the pressure difference, they don't want to risk that there. So after a pneumothorax collapsed lung, they usually avoid air travel for about 2 weeks just to make sure everything's healed up. They don't want that air pressure to fluctuate so much that caused that issue there. So it's pretty crazy. But then as soon as they started mentioning the air travel, then you're thinking, okay, that sounds like lung. And then they revealed all the stuff that they did there. So if this isn't a reason to pay Jordan Poyer for traveling 15 hours and playing through what he was dealing with, I don't know what is. Other reports, I do know that Deshaun Watson did have to deal with the same thing when he's playing with Houston. I can't remember where he traveled to, but he had quite a long car ride too when he hired this back in 2019, 2020, I think it was. So it's a crazy thing. It's something we don't see often, but it's incredible that what these guys play through, despite there's that level of injuries that we know that I talk about. And then there's that level below that we don't know about. And that was kind of at that level that brought up to that point once those results came out that he had to travel by car.
Is there a long-term concern here? Is this he'll be fine after the bye, or are we going to be nervous about this the rest of the way?
It's going to heal just totally fine. He said that. I know from medical, understanding the medical aspects of it, it heals up fine. There's no recurrence of it. It's not like now he could suffer another one if he has another rib fracture, things like that. But that's a totally different, issue there. But it's not like this one's going to spontaneously, happen again or there's going to be problems. So once it heals up, it's good to go and he's fine there. They want to avoid air travel for about 2 weeks and then they want to make sure that he's fine. And then you think about off bye week for this week, playing against the Packers in week 8. Then they travel out to New York City for week 9. I don't think they even have a long traveling for the rest of the season until you get to playoffs. I think Cincinnati might be the longest travel. I can't remember if they even go out there. But once again, they're not traveling to Los Angeles. They're not traveling to Arizona. They're not going super far. So it's fortunate that the medical staff, I think it'd be negligent if they didn't consider that with the air travel, but I'm glad that they're saying, hey, here's what we can do. And Poyer was agreeable to it because he could have just said, hey, I'm a veteran. I got to save my body. I'm going to sit at home. But he knew the magnitude of this game. He understood what it takes, and he played awesome when he was there.
Listen, you said traveling in the playoffs. I don't think the Bills are going anywhere until February, right? Home field, Dr.
That's
Kyle
very
Trimble.
true. That's very
Let's talk about this Chiefs game real quick here. I think the Bills got out of it pretty healthy. A couple stingers with Christian Benford and Dane Jackson. The most severe thing was probably Spencer Brown. Looked like an ankle injury. I was there at the game, and so he goes down, and the cart immediately came out on the field, and I'm like, oh, no. And his teammates are starting to come around him, and he's down for a while, and then eventually kind of stands up and refuses the cart and walks off the field. Of course, Sean McDermott has nothing to tell us on Monday, right? There's no chance this man would dare tell us what's going on with Spencer Brown on Monday when he doesn't have to meet the media again until the following week. So speculate the best you can here on the status of Spencer Brown.
So he got injured with 6:37 left in the second quarter. He got tripped from behind. I can't really tell on video without slowing it down who tripped him up, but it just, those bodies are flying everywhere in that game. So he gets tripped up from behind and his ankle rolls, that your standard lateral low ankle sprain. The fact that they brought him to bring the card out, and I saw something about they wanted to bring an air cast out, suggested it was either going to be a bad sprain or they were worried about fracture. But he even caught up with Thad Brown out in Rochester after the game with the walking boot on, no crutches, which is good to see, that he had bad sprain and he was not going to take the card off because, NFL pride and whatnot there. So I looked at the research and I had to do a double take on this. The average time for a guy to miss for an ankle sprain, a low ankle sprain, is 6.5 days, which I'm like, we've seen guys miss more time with that. So it's very possible we could play against Green Bay in week 8, which would be fantastic. I did know a lot of people when I was on another podcast earlier this week, and then even just on, that social media stuff there, a lot of people weren't happy with his play even prior to that there. So you got to wonder if maybe they just give him an extra week, because David Questenberry did all right in his place there. Even if Brown could play and it looked worse than it did, I would still worry about trying to move laterally, trying to keep your guy on the outside. Like, that's a lot of work that right ankle's doing. You're pushing, you're moving, you're trying to engage with your block. There's a lot of stuff will go with that. And if you're already struggling a little bit, do you get the guy out there, or do you give him a week off just to let another guy in there? That's why you have that depth there. So I'd be okay if he didn't play against the Packers, but we have to see how practice reports go out. But I'd rather play against the Jets and have an extra week off rather than trying to get out there and struggle like he already had been prior to that.
Yeah, no reason to rush anybody back with the depth that you have. David Questenberry's a very reasonable replacement. And so it's good to know that we're not thinking this is a long-term IR type situation. So I think that's the encouraging takeaway that I have from your thoughts there. Kyle, we got an email a few weeks ago that we've been kind of holstering for this moment during the bye. We were hoping that the team would get healthy and we wouldn't have that much to talk about, and we're here, right? The Bills are in pretty good shape from a health perspective. So let's talk about this email. And this is a great question that I'm anxious to hear how you answer, and it's very relevant to, not just the Bills, but football in general. So let me read this question. It says, my question is about non-contact ligament injuries like a torn ACL or MCL. It seems to me like they are just time bombs waiting to explode. I'm not talking about the ACL injuries that occur due to actual contact, but just when someone is running in cuts and then they go down. Are there any studies out there on the issue? Since these issues are not induced by any specific trauma, it seems like they are the product of a ligament being weakened over time and will inevitably tear at some point. Is this true?
Okay. So a ticking time bomb. That's a new way to look at that. I hadn't considered that. I'm looking to disprove that today, though. So I want to put a disclaimer before I get out there. There is a ton of ACL research. This goes back, 30, 40 years, and they've really evolved how they've rehabbed the ACL, what they think of it. And we see that with other injuries. But I mean, when you type in ACL research into Google Scholar or PubMed or anything else, there's just thousands of articles. You go down deep, dark rabbit hole with this. And the goal with mine here is to really kind of touch on the overview of everything. So I'm not really trying to go deep down into it. We could do a week's worth of podcasts on this thing if we really want to. And, I think people are here for Bills talk and not ACL injury talk. So I'm just going to highlight a few things and then just kind of talk about just generally some of the risk factors and kind of just what we see here. So we know that the ACL is one of the 4 ligaments within the knee. We know that the mechanism of injury, the most common is that of a sudden pivoting or cutting maneuver during sporting activity. Commonly in football, basketball, and soccer. We're seeing that we're talking about football here. We see there's the internal, external rotation of the tibia, which is your shin bone. We see along with that hip internal rotation, a valgus stress force is where the knees point inward, the ankles point outward. We also see hip abduction and play with that there. So think about your hip coming out sideways like you're trying to do a snow angel. And then we look at the knee flexion, how the knee bends there. So all that plays a part into that pivoting, that cutting. And then we also see injuries happen with deceleration, that sudden stopping. Think of, future Bill, hopefully future Bill, Odell Beckham, how he tore his ACL in the Super Bowl. He's had to slow down, and that's how his gave. See landing and jumping, all tearing the ACL. So there's a lot of different ways to tear this thing. Going back to that ticking time bomb thing, does it happen a whole lot? I'm glad that the person that asked this question differentiated between contact and non-contact. We see contact ACL tears is where there's a direct blow to the knee about 30% of the time. The rest of them about 70%, give or take a few percentage points there. So going back to highlight the Bills specifically, we see that they've had 2 direct contact ACLs and 2 non-contact ACLs since Sean McDermott took over. And that's when I've been really, covering the Bills since 2017. Contact ones were Corey Carter. He was a punter for the Bills for preseason before he tore his ACL. And then Harrison Phillips, he did have a contact ACL tear because he had a helmet going to the side of his knee. Non-contact were Tre'Davious White, and then most recently Tommy Doyle back in week 3 against the Miami Dolphins. So we're looking at everything here with ACL tears. I'm going to go into some of the risk factors here. You have weather, you have playing surface, anatomical difference, genetics, how you're put together there, your muscular, neurological strength, biomechanic characteristics in terms of how we're moving. We're seeing athletes getting bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, if you take the athlete from 1988, when I think they started the combine, to now, they're every one of those guys are moving faster than probably 90% of those guys at the combine back, 30 years ago. You also look at the stress strain curve, so if you follow really anything, every material has a breaking point. So as we get bigger, faster, stronger, our ligaments, our tendons, aren't really they adapt to some extent, but it's not like they're going to thicken up and get super strong to adapt to the faster speeds and the heavier weights. Eventually, at some point, things, just give. That's just how materials are, and our body is no different from that. So I just list off, I think, 6 or 7 different factors there. And then you have to factor in, is there previous injuries? You're looking at if there's hamstrings, if there's ankle injuries. There is a researcher down Clemson, Jason Avezian, I butchered his name, but he looks at how concussions impact that neurological component and how your reaction time with ACLs. So there's so many variables that go into this. So to say they're a ticking time bomb, that they're just waiting to be torn is not true, to answer the question. There's just so much that goes into that, and guys are playing through everything. We even see guys play through partial tears, and they find kind of either get through the game, or they have something that kind of brings them down later on. So Tommy Doyle played the last 5 games or 5 snaps of the Miami Dolphins game because we didn't have anybody left. He's playing through a right torn ACL from what looked like on video. Sterling Shepard, the Giants, he even said a few days after what happened, was he felt a pop in his knee, didn't feel right, and then he's walking or jogging down the field and his knee just gives out on him. We're seeing just so many different variables on why guys suffer the injuries. And a lot of times it's more of that common mechanism, the cutting, pivoting. But to say that things degenerate isn't really accurate. I did look up to see whether there's a thing. It is, but it's a very rare thing, and it's not something I've even heard of even prior to looking that up there. So it's multifactorial. I wish I could give you a smoking gun to it. There are some ACL prevention stuff out there. I know teams do incorporate that into their programs, but they're not going to spend all this time focusing on prevention of one injury, because that could lead to not focusing on the game plan, not focusing on avoiding other injuries. So sometimes that cross training that we see with kids growing up, sometimes that's a better preventer of these type of injuries than focusing on sport specific things, at least until you get to the pros there. So as I'm rambling off a million things here, you're seeing how much goes into just all the variables that go into injuries. And then even they talked about MCL and ACL, and the NFL also brought up injury data, which was really good that we talked about this at this time, because this was released on October 18th. So they talked about concussions from 2015 to 2022, ACL tears, MCL tears. Concussions back in 2021 was regular season and preseason, 187 concussions. ACL tears was 71. Keep in mind extra game. And then MCL tears was 129. So we hear more about ACLs because they're season ending. They're the sexy injury, if you will, from a media standpoint. But if you had 129 ACL tears or 187 ACL tears, that'd be a bigger problem. But we see concussions all the time. We see MCL injuries all the time. And knee sprains are the most common injury we see in football. And then hamstrings are second, and then it goes on. So as I'm trying to take a breath here, it's just incredible how you see how the injuries fluctuate over time. They're trying to improve the safety of the game. They're trying to find ways to reduce it. They can't eliminate the injuries altogether, but they're trying to find ways to reduce it. And we are seeing that. So once again, go back to ACLs, it kind of fluctuates in the high 40s, 50s. It did jump up a little bit, but we're seeing the numbers stay fairly steady for the most part. So they're at least trying to do something to try to keep them down. So once again, ticking time bomb, I can't support that. And then my final thoughts on this, as I'm rambling on here, we see guys somehow play through without injuries, or something without the ACLs. John Elway was one of them. Thurman Thomas, he didn't have an ACL playing through his entire career until he tore his other ACL when he's in Miami. Hines Ward didn't play with an ACL. He had an injury back in childhood. And I had got to interview Thurman Thomas a few years ago. He said that ACL deficient knee he hurt in college is in better shape than the one he injured against Miami. So it's just really interesting how one ligament gets so much attention, and they've tried to do what they can to improve it, but sometimes you can't do anything about it. So I hopefully answered the question in full. I have plenty more resources. Somebody really wanted to ask the questions, but there's just a lot more into it than just saying they're ticking time bombs.
A quick follow-up on all this. Is there something that can be done from an examination perspective that could give you some clues about the likelihood of an ACL tear? And I know that there's some teams out there that care about knee circumference, right? That's a thing. I know that I've heard things about different styles of weight training and how it puts different stresses on different parts of your knees that could maybe lead to injuries occurring in certain areas of the leg. I'm just wondering if there's any information that you could research about a person, right? And let's make it very specific, about a player you're going to bring into your football team, right? Whether it's a draft pick or a free agent, to give you an idea of the likelihood that they're going to have an ACL injury.
Prior ACL injury is a big indicator of that. Once you had one, your risk factors go up to have another one within 2 years. That's one big thing there. There are some anatomical differences. I think the Steelers were the big ones with the knee circumference. I can't remember who it was. It was recently.
Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly's big on knee circumference.
Who was it? Chip Kelly, you said?
Chip Kelly, yeah.
Okay. So it's weird. I don't know how that would be there, but if you look at the anatomical differences without getting too much into it, the smaller intracondyle notch is basically where the femur, the moose knuckle aspect of it, if the notch is smaller by a few millimeters, that can increase your risk, they found. The slope of your tibia, the joint laxity in the knees there. Sometimes people are just more naturally like that double jointed. The Q angle, which is relation to the angle between the quadriceps and patella, if I recall that correctly from PT school. Strength in the hips, prior injuries to those other areas and the ankles, how you're landing. So sometimes they can do screening and say, hey, I don't like how that guy lands that there. And sometimes you might see that with sport specific guys there. They might only play football all the time, or they might only play basketball, or they might only do certain sports, and they get those overuse injuries, and then that can lead to other stuff there. I don't want to say this is the reason why Sean McDermott likes wrestlers so much. I think it's because they wrestled, but there's a lot of cross training with that. And having wrestled myself, you have to work every part of your body there. So to have that balance, the strength all across your body, not just focusing on a shot or a throw or a kick, it really helps kind of harden your body to make sure that you can move around better. So there are screening tools that they can use, the various ones in the PT world that sometimes can screen somebody for potential injuries or how they're moving. We can look at hydration too. We saw that a few weeks ago with Miami, though I don't think that had anything to do with Tommy Doyle per se. And then I just want to look at just, I don't want to call it genetics. I don't want to say ACL is a genetic predisposition to be tearing, but there might be some smaller things they look at, say, hey, this guy has happened. I think there's a set of twins that were going through NFL draft and looking at whether I think one did have ACL tear, one didn't. That was something else altogether, but I'm sure there's other variables that the teams do look at, but there are some things they can look at to say, hey, this guy might be at risk for it, or do we have to worry about that? But going back to the original thing I said, probably the biggest predictor is a prior ACL tear.
Well, Dr. Kyle Trimble, we've gotten a lot out of you here in this bye week. Thanks for sharing your expertise, of course, and getting us through some confusing stuff here. The stuff that I can't talk about. So thanks for coming on. I always appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, thank you.
All right, here's a sports analogy for you. When it comes to burglars, your home is like the end zone, and you need the absolute strongest defense you can muster. This is why I use and trust SimpliSafe Home Security. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. It's cutting-edge technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, so you always know your home is safe. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors in every room, window, and door. They have HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. You can customize a perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. BetOnline.net is the number one source for football betting and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts. All right, let's get into some prospects for you to watch this Saturday with an eye towards the Buffalo Bills. And folks, I got to start with the Syracuse Orange. I know that there's a lot of hype for the Orange and what they've been able to get done, and there's a lot of Syracuse fans that listen to this podcast, and even some of you have let me know that you're not happy that I haven't talked about these prospects yet. So let's give you an entire moment here to consider the Syracuse players that I think are the best NFL draft prospects on the team, and not necessarily that I think they're all fits for the Bills, but let's go ahead and shout them out. And if the Bills are looking for players at these positions, I like actually all four of these guys. So they've got some good players over there at Syracuse. So at 12 p.m. Eastern time, ABC, number 14, Syracuse at number 5, Clemson. Syracuse has typically played Clemson pretty tough. They've stolen some wins through the years. And obviously this is one of the better Syracuse teams we've seen in a long time. And Clemson, while they're number 5 and undefeated, I don't think they are unbeatable. I think they have some vulnerability. So it should be a fun ball game. These are the guys for Syracuse that I think are the best prospects. And this is in no particular order, but I will start with left tackle Matthew Bergeron, number 60, 6'5", 322 pounds, an experienced player. He's really having a good season. I watched him over the summer, and I thought he was okay. I thought he was a draftable guy, kind of a day 3 player, developmental type guy, but he's really turned it on this year. He's looking very sturdy in pass protection, has the power that you're looking for in the run game, and he's got a lot of experience, and he comes with a lot of good reviews on him from people I trust, and I've actually had a chance to speak to the Syracuse coaching staff about him, and they rave about him. So left tackle Matthew Bergeron, number 60, 6'5", 322. Now, you got to mention this running back they have, Sean Tucker. He's a really special player, number 34, 5'10", probably 210 pounds, maybe a little bit more. And he's explosive. This is a guy with legit breakaway speed. I mean, an unbelievable second gear with him. And he runs physical. He runs decisively. And the big question that I had for him this year was, what can he offer on passing downs? Because for as outstanding of a player as he is and how many records he's broken at Syracuse, I was a little surprised watching him over the summer that he wasn't a guy that got involved a ton in the passing game. Well, that's changed this year. They've gotten him going in the screen game, some flare routes, even occasionally on some wheels. and you've seen the receiving production come with Sean Tucker, and obviously you love big plays, and he's got breakaway speed, and Dino Babers loves him. Dino Babers, when I talked to him in July about Sean Tucker, man, he raved. He told me that he's going to be better this year and that his work ethic is off the charts. And, Dino Babers, it feels like he's very hardworking at the facility all the time. And he talks about Sean Tucker as a guy that's always there with him and just putting in a lot of time, a process guy through and through, if you will. So Sean Tucker is going to make an NFL team happy. Rock solid day 2 prospect in my mind. And you love the big play potential that he offers. They got a couple guys on defense to shout out. Linebacker Michael Jones, number 3, 6'1", 225 pounds. He's the emotional leader of the defense. He plays fast and physical. He's got speed and athleticism, which projects well to a modern-day linebacker that you need to play in space and cover, but also is physical enough to play downhill. Now, he's not the biggest linebacker, but I think he can hold his own and has really elevated his game this year. He's playing his best football, and Syracuse is playing good defense. And Michael Jones is at the heart and soul of that. Also, a cornerback, Garrett Williams, number 8, 6 foot, 190 pounds. I really like Garrett Williams. I know he's not perfect, and he's given up some plays down the field this year, but he's highly competitive. He's extremely physical. I love corners that tackle and playoff contact. You have no questions about Garrett Williams in that capacity, and I think he's got enough to be sufficient in man, but I really like him in zone. I really do. I think he's going to be a good zone corner where he's got ball skills and that ability to kind of read the backfield and cue into throwing lanes. And so I wouldn't draft him to play tons of man coverage, but honestly, for a defense like the Bills, you could see him really fitting in. And I love the physicality, ball skills, and tackling ability. So there you go. The 4 best players on Syracuse. Get a chance to see them in a great matchup against Clemson on the road, 12 o'clock Eastern, ABC. Let's go to the 3:30 slate. Watch the UCLA, number 9 UCLA at number 10 Oregon. Check out their running back, Zach Charbonnet for UCLA, number 24, 6'1", 220 pounds. He is a powerful dude. He's averaging 4.7 yards after contact so far this year, and that number for his career is over 3.5 and much higher if you consider just the UCLA portion of his career. He started at Michigan, transferred over to UCLA, and he's been phenomenal for them. I mean, he's been a legit monster of a running back, and he's got a really nice blend of explosiveness to go with those power components that he has. 7 yards per carry this year so far. And this is going to be a great test for him. Oregon's going to be a good test. They've got some good players in their front 7, a couple of NFL defensive linemen in Brandon Dorless and DJ Johnson, 2 NFL linebackers in Noah Sewell and Justin Flo. Both of those guys are physical, downhill players. And so you're going to see a really nice opportunity for Zach Charbonnet to showcase himself as a prospect. And a guy that I actually think a lot about whenever I watch Zach Charbonnet is Carlos Williams. Remember the 1 year that he had coming out of Florida State and provided a big spark for the Bills? I think he's that type of runner where stylistically and that type of skill set is what you can get from a Zach Charbonnet. And as we consider the need for this Bills offense to have a legitimate short yardage guy, that's what Zach Charbonnet offers. But I don't think that's it, right? He's a do everything back. He brings a lot to the table. I think he's got NFL starter ability. And if the Bills were interested in another day 2 investment on a running back, this is the type of skill set that they probably need to go with James Cook and then whoever that starter is, whether it's Devin Singletary back for next year or whatever that winds up being. So Zach Charbonnet, 24, running back UCLA, great contest, 3:30 p.m. against Oregon. The last one for you, 8 p.m. on FS1, number 17, Kansas State versus number 8, TCU. Check out TCU left guard Steve Avila. Where's number 79? He's a big dude, 330-pound offensive guard. He's playing left guard this year, played center the last 2 years, has 96 snaps at right guard under his belt, 113 at right tackle. So you love the versatility, a guy that can play multiple positions for you. I think at the NFL, he's a guard center, right? You can go either or there. For the Bills, I'd like him best at guard, left guard in particular. He's a physical mauler in the run game. You want a guy that can create push and displacement up front, create that movement, create those gaps. He can do it. I think he's a sufficient pass blocker, has enough. Well, he's got a good anchor, but I don't know that he's overly nimble, but he's sufficient enough with his footwork. He's a sufficient enough player to climb and get to the second level. But really what you like about Steve Avila is the power that he offers and what he can mean for your run game. And so I see him as a mid-round pick, maybe third, fourth round, that some team could draft and get a potential starter because he's got starter traits. So check him out. Left guard, Steve Avila, TCU, number 79. They're a fun offense, so you'll have fun watching that football game. So there you have it. Some players for you to watch this weekend with an eye towards the Buffalo Bills, and, of course, some love for the undefeated Syracuse Orange, who are having a great season, and they've got a lot of good football players for you to check out. That'll be a good fun game against Clemson on Saturday. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here this week on the podcast. It's been really fun. I've been really enjoying these guest conversations with Greg Tomsett, with Nate Geary, of course, Dr. Kyle Trimble. Monday, Bruce Nolan from the Bruce Exclusive is going to join me to talk Bills defense, and that should be a phenomenal conversation, so don't miss it before we kind of do herd mentality on Tuesday and then get back into our rhythm, getting ready for the Green Bay Packers starting on Wednesday. So don't miss anything. Make sure you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great weekend. Enjoy football, and I'll catch up with you again on Monday.